Welcome to the Good and Plenty podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Goodman. Plenty to talk about. This is the second edition of the College Hoops podcast. It'll be every Thursday throughout the season. I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Granum, and we have plenty to talk about with the FBI college basketball trials starting up the last couple days. But first, you can subscribe to both the College and Pro Good and Plenty podcast on iTunes, on Stitcher, CLNS Media. You can find me on Twitter at Goodman Hoops. You can find me on Stadium, watchstadium.com. And please give us your feedback. Write reviews. They all help us try to make this thing better as we go forward. Last couple days were a little bit crazy, Chris. I was actually in a courtroom, which I never thought I'd say when it came to covering college basketball. Not about, we're not really going to talk here to start this thing off about preseason and rankings or All-Americans or any of that.
It's not where the news is right now. It's not where the news is. You were where the news was earlier this week in New York City at the courthouse following the NCAA's FBI investigation, the first couple days of the trial. So, there wasn't a lot of media coverage there. You were one of a few people that was inside the courtroom. No phones allowed in there, so you weren't allowed to tweet updates as the case went on. So it was limited. So let's jump right in here. Kind of describe the scene. What was it like there for your 2 days that you were present? Just give us a little taste of what it was like.
I expected it to be a circus. I really did. We got there early. I went in with my former colleague, Jeff Borzello, who's with ESPN, and he lives about an hour outside. And he said he came in from Long Island, took the train in, and we met at Penn Station. I had a hotel right around the corner from Penn Station, and he knows how to get around the subway. I do not.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So I'm like, all right, I'm going to meet you. And I think we met at 8 o'clock, maybe even earlier. He might have gotten in at like 7:30, and it didn't start until 9:30, and it's probably a half an hour to get down to Lower Manhattan where it is, the courthouse. So we get down there, and we're the first ones there. There's nobody else there. We're like sitting in there just waiting for a half hour, 45 minutes. Then we find out, and again, like you said, when you go in, you have to get through security. Mm-hmm. So they take your phone, your computer, and they check it. So you can't do anything. Once you're in there, no tweeting, no writing, no nothing.
Closed door.
Yeah, if there's a break, you can run out and try to get your stuff back and go to lunch for an hour or whatever. Or if you have two people in there for the same outlet, one person can leave if something big happens.
Right.
But it's hard. If you're just one person,
you're limited.
Well, you don't want to leave because you're afraid like it could be a bombshell coming around.
Yeah.
So what do? And it's real interesting. So anyway, we go in there, and Borzello and I are the only ones there, and they move it to a bigger courtroom right away before it starts.
Was that because of the amount of people there, or what was the reason for that?
Yeah, the jury, the prospective jurors, they knew they were going to bring in 50.
Got it.
And they're probably, I'm trying to think how many people it probably fit. In the entire courtroom, probably 125. Okay. 50 on one side, 50 on the other, and then you got up front, for the jurors and then the lawyers, and obviously the judges are up front. So, we go in there and they tell us where you can sit. There's certain rows that you can sit. Jurors going to be on the left side.
This is a whole nother experience, I feel like.
I had never been to a trial, so it was really cool.
Right.
And I wish I could be there more. Unfortunately, I'm traveling like crazy over the next month, so I had to come home. But I think it was really interesting, again, to see how the whole process worked. And we go in there. Dan Wetzel's there. He's covered a bunch of trials. Aaron Hernandez won. So he's kind of the veteran that we're,
he knows
I'm picking his brain. Yeah. Mark Schlabach's there. Again, former colleague at ESPN, college football guy who does some college hoops. And wrote the big Sean Miller story that we're still going to see how that plays out at some point with DeAndre Ayton and Christian Dawkins. But there really weren't many media people. Adam Zagoria there from Zag's blog, who I like to rip on, but Zags, he works hard. He works very hard, and he was wearing his sweatpants.
Naturally.
Which, I don't know, sports writer. Like Wetzel said, he's dressed like a sports writer.
Yeah.
We were all dressed
in suits or
sport coat.
Right.
I didn't want to go suit. I'm done with the tie.
Done with the tie?
I'm done with the tie.
I like that. That's
done
nice.
with the tie. Unless, if I'm on trial, I'll wear the tie.
Hopefully you're really done with the tie. Yeah.
Christian Dawkins, the only one who didn't wear a suit out of the three defendants. The second day he was wearing a sweater. First day I think it was just a shirt. Gatto and Merle Kobe were both in suits.
They were suited.
Yeah, they were, but they're older. Christian Dawkins is 26 years old.
Yeah.
But I would have still been in a suit.
I think I would have too. again, hopefully you and I don't run into this kind of situation where we are. So they moved it to the bigger courtroom.
Yep, and they start, basically start with a jury selection pretty quickly. And they bring in 50 jurors, prospective jurors, and he's asking different questions. How many of you were familiar at all with what went on a year ago with this whole story and the situation? And only 2 people raised their hands out of the first 50, which I found surprising, but we live in a bubble.
We do, and I was going to say that's shocking to me too, but again, everyone I talk to, everyone that I'm around all day, they're surrounded by college basketball, they're surrounded by the NBA, so that's our bubble. So that's surprising. So 2 out of the 50.
Yeah, no families were there the first day, which I was a little surprised, but they must have been told, hey, it's just jury selection. You don't need to be there. There's nothing that's going to happen.
Got it.
Really that's going to matter. So they didn't get through the whole jury selection, and it's not like on TV. It's kind of boring.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of questions, again, that really aren't all that interesting at the end of the day, and he's explaining to the jurors a little bit about the case, the overview of the case and everything like that. And eventually they got it down to where Tuesday morning they picked the behind closed doors. Each, I guess, U.S. attorneys get to choose a certain amount of the jurors, or it's a point system. I don't know exactly how that worked. But
it's outside of our bubble a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not like the NBA draft or anything like that.
So when they're choosing,
there's no ping pong balls.
No, I prefer ping pong balls. But in this scenario, so are they, in terms of talking with the potential jurors, and are they naming any programs? Are they naming players that will be brought up during the trial? How deep do they go in that first day?
So eventually what they did was they read off a ton of names. The U.S. attorney read off a ton. I mean, he rattled off, it must have been 100 names. First, there were like 25 names of potential witnesses that could take the stand. And then he rattled off 100 names of programs, of names, everybody from LSU, Oregon, and obviously the schools that were involved, we know, to Romeo Langford, Zion Williamson, Rick Pitino, you name it. There were a lot of people that were named, and it wasn't saying that any of them would be implicated or charged or anything like that. It was, these are people who might come up within the trial, and if you have any relationship or your boyfriend lives next door or anything about these people, then you got to tell me.
Yeah.
You got to tell me, and then I'll decide if you're out.
Got it.
It was interesting. One of the prospective jurors said, he's like, listen, I'm a lung surgeon, and I've got stuff set up in the next couple weeks already. So eventually he was excused, but he wasn't excused that moment. One woman who I believe is on the jury, she was still in the courthouse, so I think she's on the jury. Maybe she got excused. Said she worked at Louisville while Pitino was there, and I thought she'd be gone that moment.
Yeah, see, then
she wasn't.
Really?
She wasn't. She was kept around. So it was really, people are trying to get out of it. They're like,
sure.
I've
got a dentist appointment next week.
Right. Or I got 2 kids, and basically the judge is like, well, can you get help picking up your 2 kids? Like, do you have
got
friends?
A babysitter? Yeah.
And she was like, no, I'm a single mom, and so it's just interesting to see. Most people didn't really want to get out of it. Like weren't as adamant about getting out of it as I thought they were.
Right.
Because all you got to do is come up with like a really good excuse,
and you're out. Yeah,
you're gone. Right. You're gone. Like, listen, I got no help, from my family, or I got, one of them said, like, I got a vacation already planned.
Yeah.
You can come up with creative ways here.
They're not want to get out.
They're not checking, I don't think, every excuse you give.
Right.
So anyway, everything was done Tuesday morning. By I think it was like 11 o'clock is when it all got going. The actual trial got going with the opening statements.
Right. So that's when the lawyers come in with their opening statements, and obviously that is one of the more interesting portions of this case, especially in the early going here. Yep. So you've got, like, Jim Gatto's lawyer obviously came out against the NCAA, as Jeff Borzello put it, kind of came out swinging. So what was really the defense for their clients in general terms after these lawyers? I mean, this is really the meat and bones of some of this. So what was the strategy or angles they were taking initially?
The big thing was, from at least 2 of the defendants' lawyers, was, listen, yeah, we broke NCAA rules. We definitely broke NCAA rules. But last I checked, breaking NCAA rules isn't breaking laws.
Right.
And that's going to be what they contend and contest throughout this entire trial, which is expected to last somewhere between 3 and 4 weeks, according to the judge. So, it was, did my client, Jim Gatto, pay Brian Bowen's father? Was he involved in all this? $20,000 of a $100,000 payment? Yeah, he did. He did. But the other thing was, so the U.S. attorney, the government is saying their whole position is these guys defrauded the universities, okay? Defrauded the universities because they paid these players, making them ineligible. So when they signed their scholarships, they were ineligible. They weren't being honest because they had already been paid.
Right.
So,
too late.
So that's what this is coming down to, is basically the government claiming that they were defrauding the universities and hurting the universities. And I thought it was kind of comical in a sense because, and I agree 100% with this, with the lawyers, the defense lawyers were saying, especially for Jim Gatto. Jim Gatto is trying to help these schools.
Exactly, yeah.
He's not trying to hurt them.
He's not trying to tear them down.
He wants to get them players.
Exactly.
He wants to help them. And she said, one of the things that Casey Donnelly, who was one of the two attorneys for Gatto, and she's the one who spoke during the opening statements, what she said was, listen, Jim Gatto, all he knew from these universities were the coaches.
That's it.
That's all. He didn't deal with, really even probably athletic directors, certainly not presidents, certainly not other administrators.
Not terribly deep in that regard.
He dealt with the coaches. And,
right.
and she said, when the coaches asked him to do something, he felt it was his job, part of his job, to help those coaches, to help Adidas, who he worked for,
right,
and to help those coaches. And in order to do that, he felt like, was he doing some stuff that was probably a little bit shady from a standpoint of not being completely open to what he was doing, fake invoices and things of that nature? Sure. But as one lawyer put it, you're not going to put all that stuff out there open because, then it's going to hurt these kids. Ultimately, then they may not be able to play college basketball. Merle Code's lawyer said, listen, Merle Code was a player. He was a player at Clemson. He did it for a lot of these families because he understood where they came from. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, again, the defense attorneys are making the three of them out to be like martyrs.
Right. And
like these goody two-shoes that can do nothing wrong.
That's interesting.
They're not that either.
Mm-hmm.
I know Jim Gatto. I really like Jim Gatto as a guy. Right. I do. He made like $130,000. That was the other thing that his attorney said is, listen, this was not some guy who was running Adidas.
Yeah.
He was a mid-level manager for Adidas, making $130,000.
He's not making $2.5 million.
Hell no.
Yeah.
He's not profiting off any of these. Mm-hmm. He's trying to keep his job. He's trying to keep up with Nike.
Right.
That's what he's trying to do here, ultimately. But again, anybody you talk to in the industry will say, like Jim Gatto, really good guy. Mm-hmm. Did he make a mistake? I guess. I mean, again, I guess he did. But I'm sure he thought when he was doing this, he didn't think he was breaking a law.
Right, and that's ultimately what it all comes down to. And again, they spoke about it a lot yesterday. We're recording this on Wednesday, so obviously it's going on right now. But it's the difference between breaking, an NCAA violation compared to a federal law or something like that. And again, that's probably going to get beaten to death down the road here. And we talked about it last week when we talked about Book Richardson. Is there a need for his door to be broken down by a battering ram at 6 a.m. for breaking an NCAA violation compared to a federal law? So obviously that's going to be kind of beaten down here. How long is this portion of the trial going to take in terms of lawyer statements and stuff? Obviously, it's going on as we speak in New York, but what's the timeline here for this next week? Quick break to tell you guys that today's show is brought to you by Stamps.com. In today's world, everything is on demand. TV, podcasts, movies, parking, you name it, there's probably an app for it. Well, now you can get your postage on demand too with Stamps.com. Stamps.com operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and is available wherever your desk may be. Sometimes life gets in the way of getting to the post office, but now you can let Stamps.com bail you out. Just click, print, and mail it. Done deal. Whenever CLNS Media needs to send me new equipment or anything to get the job done, they use Stamps.com. It's a no-brainer. Stamps.com will even send you a digital scale. That way you can weigh everything you send out and you can be confident that it's the correct amount of postage every single time. Sign up for Stamps.com today by going to Stamps.com and clicking the microphone at the top of the page. Enter the letters GNP after you click the microphone to receive a 4-week trial, which includes postage and a digital scale. That's a 4-week trial just by going to stamps.com, clicking the microphone at the top of the page, and using my promo code GNP.
So there are some days that the judge they don't sit on Fridays.
Okay.
So you're really talking most weeks it's 4 times a week. And I think he was supposed to go to like Tennessee, the judge. And then he came back like an hour later. He's like, yeah, we're not going to be able to sit half of next week of like Wednesday and Thursday or whatever days. Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm going to be gone. Then he came back like half an hour later. He's like, yeah, I'm going to do a video conference.
I'll be here.
I'll be here. I'm doing a video.
Interesting.
Actually, the most comical part of the whole day, Tuesday, was so when Casey Donnelly, Gatto's lawyer, was going through her opening statement, there was a PowerPoint presentation that
which was not
showing.
Expected.
Well, not according to the judge, it wasn't. I didn't know. I'm watching it. I've never been in a trial. I'm watching it, and it's basically just highlighting what she's talking about.
Right.
She's talking about how these programs make a ton of money, and it's showing up there how they make their money, revenue, with merchandise and ticket sales and you name it, whatever. And she's going through all these things. And we're like 10 minutes into this, and all of a sudden the judge is like, I guess one of the U.S. attorneys said something to the judge because they could see it. The lawyers could see it. The jury could see it. We could see it. There were monitors all over the place.
Okay.
Well, evidently the judge forgot to turn his monitor to the right channel.
You're kidding.
So he had no idea this was going on, and he flipped out. He's like, this was deceptive. This was secretive. Like, I can't believe you did this. Did you clear it by anybody?
What an amazing extra storyline to add on to this. Yeah,
it was like, good little. So my take on that is like, he should have known. He should have known. Right. First of all, you should have had your monitor the right channel, number one. Yeah. Number two, they're not getting that PowerPoint on all those monitors without having somebody in the court that set that up for them.
Right.
So they're apologizing after.
Interesting. That's another fun little side spin.
I wish I could be there every day.
Yeah.
The
people watching, there's so many parties involved in this. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but the people watching within that courtroom has to be fascinating because you have it's such a complex situation. There's so many parties involved. It's
other lawyers there.
Exactly.
Listen, Brian Bowen's lawyer was there. Book Richardson's lawyer was there. So they're watching, obviously. They're very involved. Brian Bowen's father is going to, take the stand soon here and flip, it looks like, on Christian Dawkins.
Right.
That's what his lawyer said.
Right, and that'll be one of the more interesting and probably gripping portions of this trial. And obviously, like you just mentioned, there's been a lot of names that have popped up. Obviously, Brian Bowen was a major one, and Oregon popped up recently. You even had names of Zion Williamson and Romeo Langford.
And I don't think they're going to be...
There won't be major.
Here's what Langford and Zion have in common. Both of their parents ran AAU programs.
Okay.
And I believe both ran Adidas AAU programs.
Did. Right.
And were both paid by Adidas. So I think that's where they're going to... Yeah, I think they're going to probably go into that. I don't think they're going to say, like, it was illegal.
Right.
But I think they're going to... Somehow that's going to potentially come up.
Right, and I'm sure it will too. So there's
the Dana Altman. That was the Oregon thing.
The Oregon thing was crazy, basically saying that they offered the quote astronomical amount of money for recruit Brian Bowen, who ultimately ended up at Louisville, and obviously we all know how that panned out. But again, these are just names. There's no full details being drawn out at this point. So
is there any? Even if there's a conversation on tape, on wiretap, right? Does that mean it was true? I mean, Christian Dawkins, how much are we going to believe about a runner who's trying to get players for Andy Miller for himself?
Right.
How much are we believing?
This also,
right?
Yeah.
Even if it's true, which I think, honestly, some of it will be true, and a lot of it will be bullshit. I just think, ultimately, are you going to be able to prove it, and are you going to have to prove it, or is some of this going to be, even if you talk about the act, is that potentially going to be enough to send you to jail?
Right. And it's interesting because now,
or to get you in trouble with the NCAA, one or the other.
One or the other.
There's two big differences. But again, some of these coaches, again, if they're on a wiretap talking about money and paying out money, do their ADs say, you know what? I'm done with them.
Right.
I'm done with them. That's enough for me. Where other ADs say, well, you know what, we need proof that it happened.
Yeah, right. And again, you mentioned Dana Altman and Oregon, obviously. So how does this, again, we're at the stage where it's just names right now. We don't have full details. So let's go with Oregon and Dana Altman, for example. Obviously, the school came out and made a statement basically saying that they were looking into it. They had no knowledge of this, and they take the matter seriously. What does this mean, these allegations mean for a program like Oregon, potentially this season down the road? What does it mean for them right now?
I think today you're fine. It just depends if it gets to a different level and we hear or somebody hears the actual recording of a conversation between somebody at Oregon and Christian Dawkins or Jim Gatto or whoever. Now, it wouldn't be Jim Gatto because Oregon's a Nike school.
Right.
Okay, so it was probably Christian Dawkins who said, you know, hey, you know, Oregon offered me this much for Brian Bowen at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And was it true? But again, when this stuff comes out, it's salacious enough that people will want to pick up on it, talk about it. The other schools would probably negative recruit against Oregon. And then how does it go from there? Like, how much? I mean, I just saw how it affected Michigan State's program last year with all the allegations about Tom Izzo and how he handled past instances of sexual assault related to his players. And what a distraction that was. Now, that was centered more, again, that was heavy from ESPN on Michigan State. That didn't go away. Oregon, I don't think, will be the centerpiece of this. Mm-hmm. They're going to be kind of a sidebar.
Right.
And LSU could be a sidebar. And, again, some of these other, Arizona, who knows?
But a sidebar is enough in terms for negative recruiting to come in, and obviously
I think it'll affect a lot of these programs. And again, I think it'll affect some of the coaches, frankly, that are scared, that are worried. They know they had conversations. Christian Dawkins had conversations with a ton of coaches.
Right. And there's plenty of coaches out there thinking about those exact conversations.
Well, they got a lot of them. I think if you had any conversations with any of the people who had their phones tapped, you got some sort of correspondence from the government saying that.
Right.
So you probably haven't had many 8-hour sleep nights since. You're probably scared, and now you're really scared because
there's a lot of uncertainty.
You don't know what's going to come up.
Yeah, right. I think that's the key. You don't know where it's going to go, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And again, we're still in this off-season period where recruiting kind of takes center stage, and that uncertainty falls into the recruiting stages too. Of course, we mentioned the negative recruiting. You mentioned how, say, it's a lost scholarship down the road, whatever it may be. But kind of switching gears here over to the recruiting plane.
We're not going to talk about FBI the entire episode every week.
Exactly.
We're not going to do that. We're not going to ignore it because it is the biggest story.
Because we could talk about it for hours per week. There's so much to dive into, but we won't do that. We'll kind of transition into recruiting right now.
Today's show is also brought to you by Audible. I think we all know at this point, Audible has the largest selection of audiobooks you'll find anywhere. Go ahead and search for something. I recently went on and found out Jim Calhoun's book, Passion to Lead, is on there. First off, what a story. One of the greatest coaches, not just in UConn history, but in basketball history. He narrates the book himself. A former colleague of mine at ESPN, Ian O'Connor, just wrote a book about New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick that the entire internet is raving about. Now Audible wants to introduce you guys to Audible Originals, exclusive titles created by celebrated storytellers from around the world, from different journalists, screenwriters, authors, and more. Every month, Audible members get 1 credit good for any book on Audible, plus they get 2 selections from Audible Originals. This is a deal you can't get anywhere else. You also get access to fitness and health tips created exclusively for Audible. Listen at home, at the gym, in the car, wherever. Plus, with Audible, your books are yours to keep, even if you cancel your membership. Don't waste any more time. Get started for free today with Audible. Go to audible.com/plenty or text plenty to 500500 for a 30-day free trial with Audible, which comes with an audiobook and 2 Audible Originals. That's audible.com/plenty or text the word plenty to 500500.
Okay, so still in the off-season mode right now, which is obviously where recruiting takes center stage. So as of late, this past week specifically, we've had Florida, the Gators, and Mike White taking center stage here, big time. They got Scottie Lewis, small forward, out of New Jersey, 6'5", 5-star recruit. I mean, this is a huge get for an already really great 2019 class for the Florida Gators. They have Trey Mann out of Florida, another 5-star recruit. And it's another loss for John Calipari and Kentucky. Obviously, they lost out on Brian Antoine. So you've got the Kentucky aspect here as well, potentially saying, is Cal losing his recruiting touch a little bit? Is there a reason Kentucky is struggling? Obviously, they're not mightily struggling, but they are losing out to teams like, Mike White and Florida.
I never would have thought that. Okay, like Scottie Lewis is a kid I've seen for years now, probably 2-3 years. He's a dynamic wing.
Yeah.
He can be an elite defender, great in transition, high character kid, was looking at Harvard a little bit. Really, really like him. And let's be honest here, one of the reasons why he went to Florida is because Brian Klatsky, who's kind of been his mentor, runs the AU program that he and Antoine play for. He's a Florida grad.
Right.
So Florida's been in the mix, and I'm not saying like Klatsky said you had to go to Florida or anything like that, but they've been in the mix for a long, long time, probably the longest of anybody because of Klatsky's relationship to the school. But yeah, I just never would have pictured John Calipari losing out to a top 15, 20 player, and you can make an argument Scottie Lewis a top 10 player easily to Mike White. And in Florida, I had a lot of concerns with Mike White, not as a coach, super high character guy. I love Mike White. Love him. There's no bullshit with Mike White. He's a really good coach. He's got great lineage, obviously. He's got, I believe, two brothers that are ADs and a father who's the head coach, the AD at Duke, Kevin White. And when he was hired at Florida, I'm just like, I just don't know if he's going to muck it up enough. Honestly, that's the truth.
Right.
I just didn't think he'd cheat enough to get players into the SEC at a place like Florida, which is hard to do it. It took Billy Donovan a while to figure it out.
That wasn't easy going off the bat.
No, like he actually got good players, highly touted guys, and didn't win. And then he got lucky. He got like Joakim Noah and Al Horford and this group that Corey Brewer was the highest.
He was the highest
McDonald's All-American.
Exactly.
And he was kind of the guy. And I think Billy kind of learned after that, you don't need these elite guys. So, yeah, I'm surprised on both ends here. I'm surprised Mike White has done this well, in my opinion, doing it clean at a place like Florida, which people will say, well, Florida, they've won 2 national titles. Yes, it's still a football school.
It is.
And go to a game at Florida and the non-conference when they're not playing anybody, and there's nobody there.
Right.
There's nobody there.
Versus going to Rupp.
Right.
At a, where
for anything.
Exactly, for anything. It's all.
They'd go, if they put Kentucky out there against me, you, and 3 other slapdicks.
I like our chances. Don't knock us too much.
They'd come and watch.
They would.
Pound the shit out of us.
They would, and they would taunt us like crazy because they care about UK basketball. But that is kind of where I'm leading here with this. Is what's going on with Cal. Obviously, this now creates, James Wiseman as maybe a must-get for him because they're in need of some big men. Obviously, losing out on someone like Scottie Lewis hurts them. But what's going on with Cal's recruiting stretch right now? Obviously, a lot of people think that James Wiseman could end up at Memphis. He's from Memphis right now, so that would be a big loss if he ends up going to Cal's former team. What do you make of Kentucky's, not necessarily struggles, but instances of losing out on some of these recruits?
Well, listen, the big thing, and I wrote this in the McDonald's game this past year, was like Cal's been getting his butt whooped by K lately. Lately, last couple of years, getting back to like, Jason Tatum and Harry Giles, and this past year, I mean, Zion and, he all 3 guys, Cam Reddish, Zion, and R.J. Barrett. He wanted all 3. He went 0 for 3. So the last couple of years, it's been different. Now, as I said in the story, it's now. I think it's going to change back. I really do. I think Cal's going to end up, reclaiming his spot as the king of recruiting in time. But right now, they got 2 kids in the back half of the top 10. Tyrese Maxey, who's talented combo guard out of Dallas, and Khalil Whitney, who blew up out of New Jersey. So 2 guys, but James Wiseman's kind of a key because, again, they didn't get a top 3 player this past year. I don't think they're going to get Cole Anthony, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't see it happening. They already have too many point guards on the roster right now. They're not all leaving.
Right.
Wiseman was coached by Penny Hardaway. He's from Memphis.
That's got the writing on the wall right there.
I mean, it does, but it doesn't, right? I mean, like, if you're James Wiseman, you're like, all right, I can stay home for 8 months and be the cornerstone and try to get this program back. But if I don't have enough around me, I could be irrelevant.
In terms of your stock going forward, right?
Well, I could put up numbers, but I'm going to be irrelevant. So I think he's got to wait. If I'm James Wiseman, I'm waiting to see who else Memphis gets. But then Penny Hardaway is probably telling him, Well, if you commit, we're going to get better players.
Right. You're the cornerstone.
So what do you do?
We're going to work around there.
So, I mean, Kentucky's still in the mix for, pretty much everybody in the top 10 who's left.
Right.
Wiseman, Vernon Carey, another big. Isaiah Stewart, another big.
Yeah.
Jaden McDaniels, who's talented. Matthew Hurt. They're all bigs, different types of bigs, but they're in there for all of them. So that's, 5 guys right there. I would assume they're going to get at least one of them.
Right.
At the end of the day.
These are fancy problems for Cal and UK. They'll be just fine.
It's more of, honestly, now, I feel like, even with Duke, I think you're going to see a change with Duke.
Okay.
I really do. I think the last few years they've gotten all these top guys, and they've gotten some kids that don't necessarily fit Duke. Trayvon Duval did not fit Duke.
No.
Did not, but they were desperate. They were super desperate to get a point guard. Duval wasn't a point guard. They just misevaluated. So they're going after more guys now. They used to identify one guy at every position.
Right.
Now they're casting a wider net. So if they miss a guy, they're not in a tough position where they're scrambling. Now Jeff Capel is gone, and that is going to hurt him.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to hurt him as much as people think, but it's going to hurt him for sure. Do they go with a different route? I've heard they may start to pull back a little bit on the one and dones and not go after as many because they haven't had success with them other than Okafor, Tyus, and Winslow.
Right.
They haven't gotten deep in the tournament with these one and dones. Even Marvin Bagley, like as a kid, Bagley fit Duke, right? As a kid, as how hard he played, Kay loved him. They loved him. But his dad, Duke's got some crazy fathers. Bagley's different crazy. Different crazy. I'll give you a good story of Bagley.
Yeah.
So I go down there with ESPN and I interview Kay and all the Duke players last year on camera. And I've known Bagley's dad. And he gets wind that I'm down there. And they're basic interviews. They're not investigative. They're just like 10-minute, talking to them, giving people a feel for who they are because they don't know Wendell Carter and Bagley. And I sat down with Grayson as well.
It's an intro to the new group.
Yeah. So he calls me at like 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm actually walking out to maybe get some breakfast before I head over for the interviews. He says, "Hey, I heard you're in town. Just want to find out what you're going to talk to Marvin about." I said, "No, Mr. Bagley, like this is nothing. Like this is a regular thing." Like I had helped him back in the day at the hoop hall, and actually his son was ineligible at that point, and he didn't want to put his son on camera. And I said, "Listen, I'm going to try to help your son as much as possible. He's in high school.
Yeah,
I'll tell you the questions. They're basic. Tell you them. I don't care. What does it matter? I want to make him look good at that point." And so I thought there was some sort of trust there. So I said, "I'm like, listen, I'm going to ask him basic questions here." So I start to interview Marvin. I'm in this room at Duke. All of a sudden, you hear a knock on the door. Marvin and his wife. They go in, they sit down and watch the entire deal.
Oh, man.
With me interviewing him on camera, producers in there, SID in there, everybody in there. I have never had that happen before. He's in college. It's one thing. You want to do that in high school?
Right.
I get it.
Yeah.
He's in college at Duke. At Duke.
Oh, man. Talk about a hover parent.
Yeah, Bagley, his father also, here's another good story. This one I've never said. We're in Omaha watching the Kansas State-Kentucky game. Okay? Duke has already been knocked out of the tournament. Mm-hmm. And I'm watching the game with a couple other people. And Kansas State's going to win. And they win. And Bagley's father is over at another table. I don't know if he saw me or not. No idea. I thought he did. I really think he did.
Yeah.
I was there all night. I was there for 3 hours, 3 tables over from him. Mm-hmm. And Kansas State wins. And Marvin Bagley's father does a dance across the restaurant celebrating. I assume he was celebrating Kentucky's loss, not Kansas State's win.
Really?
And, they picked Duke over Kentucky and a few other programs. So, he's a different dude.
What an interesting.
He's a different dude.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Well, that's interesting.
I know. I went off the
No. See, those are stories
here.
we like, and that's all people forget. That is part of the recruiting trail. It's not only recruiting some of these players, but it's their parents as well. It's their families.
Duke parents, man.
Duke parents.
They're different.
Similar to Duke.
Like
players.
I love some of them. Like some of them have been awesome to deal with, but they're
different.
Well, I don't know if they like to meddle. I'm not sure. Again, they're all different. But Bagley's dad is like nobody I've probably ever met.
That's fascinating.
Doing
That's
this. And I
interesting.
covered recruiting for a long time.
Right. That's interesting. And it's another interesting thing, kind of going back to what you were saying before. In years past, Duke has kind of gone away from those Duke guys. They've cast a wider net. Do you think a lot of that is because of Calipari's influence on the recruiting scene in years past? Are they trying to not necessarily compete with him, but go that route because of the success he's had on the recruiting trail? What do you...
Yeah, I think it was part of it. I think part of it was like Cal was kicking K's ass on the recruiting trail for a while.
Right.
And listen, the bottom line is you want to get the most talented players if you can, not understanding sometimes that you might do better with the 3 and 4 year guys.
Yeah.
Now, sprinkle in the right one and dones. And when they won it with Okafor, Winslow, and Tyus, it was like, okay, we can do this.
Yeah.
We can do this with the elite players.
Right.
But that was a special group, and they had Okafor and Tyus had a really close relationship going in. So it's going to be very interesting to see this year. Zion.
Yeah.
Reddish.
Barrett.
Trey Jones. I want to like this group, and I think I do from that perspective. From the perspective, like, again, I think Barrett's about the right things. Now, does he want to be the number one pick? Of course. Mm-hmm. Will Cam Reddish mature? I think he will. I think he's a good kid. Zion, again, I'm higher on him as a college player than I am as an NBA guy.
I am as well, yeah.
But I think they have the talent. We've talked about this last week a little bit. Like, I just don't know if they fit together as well in terms of have enough guys that can knock down shots from the perimeter.
I don't think they have enough shooters per se on that roster.
No, but it'd be interesting to see coming up here. Like, Duke doesn't have a player committed in this 2019 class, I don't think at all. They're in the mix for several players, but they're not going to get the number one player, James Wiseman. I think they'll get somebody, but, I've heard Matthew Hurt. He's got a ton of different schools on him. So it'll be very interesting to see if one of Duke or Kentucky is left out for, like, the top 5. Now, Kentucky's got 2 top 10s already. So if they got left out, it's not the end of the world. But, again, people will start to wonder if Wiseman goes to Memphis and Cole Anthony goes to Carolina and Jaden McDaniels goes where his brother is at San Diego State.
Yeah, that's
we'll
true.
Start to be like, all right, what's
Puts
going on
Duke in
here?
an interesting spot. Yeah. And do they manage that transition well, potentially if they're trying to move back towards their old strategy of finding those Duke guys? But again, it's the offseason, so recruiting trails are hot. We'll continue to follow that. We'll continue to follow the NCAA's FBI investigation from New York for the rest of this week. Into next week. Jeff, anything else on off-season duties?
Next week I'll be in Chicago. Little Big Ten Media Day. Media days are not riveting.
Right.
All right, I'm warning the listeners right now. It's not like we're going to get a ton of like great info, but I'll get some stories.
Yeah, and it means basketball.
I think I'm going to try to do that every week too. Like tell some stories that have never been told, or even like Marvin Bagley dad stories.
I enjoy
every
that
week.
kind of stuff.
Maybe I'll have a different Marvin Bagley senior, or is it senior or the third? I can't even remember.
If we could have a different Duke parent story every week, I think that would be perfect. That would be great.
I could get Greg Paulus's dad, Dave Paulus.
Yeah,
there's one.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Greg well, and there was some good. John Shire's dad was good. Now these guys weren't anything like Bagley's father.
Right.
But I had good relationships with them back in the day. We could get some good stories. DeMarcus Nelson's dad was interesting. So I think we could get some very good stories about the parents. But we'll try to, again, what we'll try to do here is we'll try to have good conversation. We'll try to have good stories. We're going to bring on people for interviews. No doubt. We're going to bring on players. We're going to bring on coaches. We're going to bring on other experts in the field of college hoops. And when we bring on these players and coaches, I'm not bringing on guys just for the sake of bringing them on because of their name.
Right.
I'm bringing on guys that are going to be entertaining. They're going to be fun. They're going to tell stories. That's what this is going to be about. The combination of entertainment and information. That's what we're going to do here. So subscribe again. Good and Plenty podcast. Every Thursday, college hoops. Every Tuesday, NBA. Chris, you're going to be with me all throughout the year.
Yep.
iTunes, Stitcher, CLNS Media. Again, reviews on iTunes. We need them. We want them. We want to know what I suck at. Maybe what I'm decent at. I don't know if there is anything, but we'll try to find something at least. If not, maybe you can lie and just maybe give me something at least to feel good about myself. And we'll talk more about the FBI, the trials, college basketball trials as they go on. In the upcoming weeks, because I think it's going to get more and more salacious. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I don't think anybody does at this point. So again, thanks for joining us. Good and Plenty podcast, and we will see you next Thursday.